Hello everyone, this is Yukai Chow and welcome to the Christian Forerunner Chess Club. Today I am going to be your teacher and this is another level A class where we learn more about how to checkmate and obviously get more familiar with checkmate because that is probably the most important thing in the game. Everyone tries to achieve checkmate. So again, just a quick review. When the king is under attack, let's say the king is under attack. Right? Let's say with the bishop, because this is called a check, right? And usually the king has to solve a check. So the king, in this case, the knight can block, and it's no longer in check. Or the pawn can block, right? That's no longer a check. If this pawn was here, then when he checks, then the king can run away, and that's no longer in check. So kings have to deal with checks. But if there's no way to deal with the check, right? Let's say in this move. The king's in check, but there's no way he can run. He can't come here because the bishop still attacks him. And there's nothing to block, right? The bishop can't block, the rook can't block, this pawn can't block. This is checkmate, right? Because there's nothing the king can do. And in chess, there's many, many different ways to checkmate. Some of them are more common than others, and I'd like to go through some basic checkmates that you see a lot in chess because they become useful. The first thing I want to show you is is basically what we just saw. The chess, there is a two-move checkmate. That's the fastest time in chess that you can checkmate is in 2 moves, and it's called the fool's mate. It's called a fool's mate because you have to be, a little bit absent-minded to lose that way. So the first move, and Black can checkmate in 2 moves. White can checkmate in 3. So how the fool's mate move works is that, let's say, White moves this move first. The king, bishop, pawn, the F pawn. Oops. Usually I recommend beginners not to ever move this pawn forward because it opens up what I call the fool's diagonal. This is the fool's diagonal for the fool's mate. And we'll see why this is such a bad idea. So let's say the pawn comes here. Right? It opens up the queen, it opens up the bishop, all good. And let's say White does the second bad move, which is moving this pawn up here too, right? And if you remember the lesson that I just showed you, the queen can now come over here and deliver checkmate. The knight can't block, the bishop can't block, the king can't go anywhere. Checkmate in 2 moves. Keep in mind, if it's for White to checkmate Black, then it requires another move because White moves first, so he has to free his queen first. Then Black does this, and then White just does something that doesn't really do much. Like let's say, all right, let's say move this move, and now he's like, I'm gonna challenge you again. Open up the fool's diagonal. Now the queen can come here and offer checkmate. This actually happened in a real game for me before. It's actually kind of funny. Once I was just joking around with a player, and I did this move, and he was like, oh no, he's attacking me. So he pushed this pawn up, and again opened up the fool's diagonal. Bad idea. And I just did this move, and he said, I'm going to challenge your pawn now, and it's defended by this pawn. And immediately I put him in checkmate. So, kind of sad, but that's one checkmate. Again, checkmate because he can't block it or solve it. So, the more common checkmates are using a queen with a backup. So, I'm going to show you the very famous scholar's mate, which is the 4-move checkmate. And this, a lot of people try to use this to use it to beat beginners. So, when the pawns are out, the queens or bishop come out. A lot of times, White moves his queen out. Usually, you don't want to move your queen out too early, but because it's a mistake. But some people try to do this trap. And let's say he moves his knight out. Again, the queen attacks the fool pawn, right, the F pawn. And now the bishop comes here. So now there's 2 attackers on this pawn, and there's only one defending the king. And if Black doesn't see that, and he moves his bishop here, then the queen will take this pawn. And that is checkmate because, again, the king cannot run away. The queen can't run away, can't run to these. He can't take the queen because the bishop defends the queen, and that is checkmate. So that's a form of checkmate that you see a lot. There's also a lot of scenarios where the king has castled. Let's say it's in this position, right? And let's say the queen is here, and let's say the knight is here. All right. In this position, White can also come here and checkmate the king. When you have a queen that's protected right in front of the king's face and no one can take him, or no one can take the queen, that's checkmate, right? So this is checkmate. let's say instead the knight's not here, but this knight is not here. So let's say there's another 2 pieces attacking the pawn in front of the king. Then taking this square is checkmate because again the king cannot run away and the king cannot take. There are other examples, like let's say if you have a rook that comes here with check. The king has to come here, and another rook comes here with check. Now the king cannot go to these 3 squares because of this rook, and the king cannot go to these squares because of the rook. So this again is checkmate, and white has won. Let's look at a few other examples. Some of them are more interesting than others. Let's look at an example. I'm not going to go through too much opening theory at this point, but let's say white does this, black does this, white does this, black does this, challenge the center, white does this, and black does this, and white does this, and black does this. Let's just say it's theoretical, right? It comes here. And let's say black moves his knight right here to challenge this knight. So I'm going to take your knight, and if you take me, I'm going to take this knight. Now what we can see is this knight can come over here and check the king, right? But this is not only check, it's checkmate. Because first, the king has nowhere to run, right? And so he can't move. But you might, if you've learned chess well, you might see, hey, wait a second. This pawn could take the knight. The knight is dead. But that's not true because the queen is here, right? So if the knight takes the pawn takes the knight, the queen puts the king in check. So this move is not illegal. Black cannot do this move. So in this case, black is checkmated. Again, checkmate happens when you check the king and the king cannot solve the problem. Cool. So that's a basic overview of checkmate. Actually, let's look at one more thing. Let's look at endgame checkmates because a lot of beginners don't know how to checkmate in the endgame, and you want to see at least a basic pattern. So a lot of times at the beginning of the game or at the end of the game, there's only a king left and maybe like a queen, right? So how do you checkmate here? There's no pieces to fight the king. Well, it turns out there's enough pieces when you have the king and the queen. What you want to do is you always want to lock the king to the corner so the king has to run. Then you use your king. Always use teamwork in chess. The king comes here, then your king comes here, and the king runs away. And remember, if you have a protected queen that is right in front of the enemy king, that's checkmate. So this is the checkmate position with a king and a queen, and this is good to remember. Not only can you checkmate with a king and a queen, you can actually checkmate with a king and a rook. And the way to do that, really briefly, is somehow you force the king to the corner. Let's just do that really quickly. So let's say the king goes to the corner, and you move your rook here, and let's say he moves here, and let's say you move here, and let's say he does a bad move, he just comes here, right? In this move, the king guards these 3 squares. So if you push the rook down, the rook also attacks these 3 squares. That's checkmate. So there are many, many different ways to checkmate in chess, and you just have to be able to figure them out, and once you know how to do that, you can start winning, and winning in chess is a good feeling. Okay, so that's the lesson for today. Hope you learned a lot, and I look forward to seeing you soon on the chessboard. Bye.